Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This is going to be a prophecy update for just the things that are happening. You've got Trump and Melania being diagnosed with COVID-19. 5 weeks out from the election, who could have thought about that, predicted that? Interesting timing, especially when you start thinking about the time frames in which we live with everything else going on. That I think prophetically are pointing to the Gog-Magog war. I think that's definitely in the latter days, like the Bible, like it clearly says in Ezekiel 38, 39. It's in the latter days. It's a last day in time prophecy. Uh, you look at the alliances that are being made. You see the activity militarily, interventions with the key players: Turkey, Russia, Iran, Libya. These kind of players that are actively engaged in military conflict and in alliance with one another. Uh, Definitely, I think points to the Gog-Magog war is imminent. I personally think that will take place before the tribulation. I think it will take place before the rapture. I think the rapture clearly is a pre-tribulation rapture of the church, and which tells me that number one, you're going to have this war that will take place. I believe you're going to see the revealing of the Antichrist, and not necessarily him declaring the peace agreement of Daniel 9, 26, 27, the 7 year peace agreement, which ultimately will be the confirmation of that is the starting point of the 7 year tribulation period. But he will be revealed in the fact that uh, he's initiating that, or elements of that will come out. And it'll be the 7 year part of it that will be the key point. And I think Christians will know it, talk about it, warn people just prior to the rapture. And I think the rapture will occur before the tribulation. Probably not, years before, but it will happen before. And I think things are moving very quickly. We're seeing things move very quickly. You see turmoil throughout the world, but you see turmoil in this country. There's always been turmoil and things like that, but not when you start adding up all the other stuff, the technology that's around the world, the ability to control all buying and selling, the ability. You look at SpaceX and their work with I forgot the name of the company right at the moment, but Global Link, I think it's called. But the launching of 60 satellites at a time, and they've got over, like, I think it's close to 800 up there now, with another. I think they're going somewhere around 4,000 or something like that. It's a large number, 8,000, something like that, 12,000. I think is what they said, 12,000 or somewhere in that ballpark that they plan on having up there, and they're launching them all the time. They're 60 a shot, and so it's not going to take very long to have a bunch of them. There are thousands of them, and basically the communications will be exceptionally fast. It'll be global. There's basically nowhere on the planet that won't have access to interconnected satellite link between one another to be able to communicate via the internet anywhere on the planet. Doesn't matter where you're at. And when you start looking at that kind of technology, it directly falls in line with the mark of the beast type of scenario. How would you have an ability to control all buying and selling all around the world, and really be able to enforce it or anything like that? But by today's standards, even 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. I remember Hal Lindsey's book, great Left Behind, or Left Behind books. You remember Hal Lindsey's book, which was the late Great Planet Earth, and those kind of things. People are like, okay, how can all this happen? But now you start looking at this, and it's definitely fully able to be implemented on a real time frame. The technology's there, and within a short period of time, we're talking, in a very short period of time, you're going to have this world covered in those type of communicating satellites. So I think it's very near, very soon. We'll see what ultimately, but we definitely want to look at some of these things that are taking place, and that's what this update's all about. So you have war breaking out with Azerbaijan and Armenia, at least in this enclave of that's within the land area, recognized land area of Azerbaijan. But there's Azerbaijan, as it's being reported, numerous news agencies are reporting that Turkey's basically the one who's uh, you know, fomenting this and pushing Azerbaijan to do this. And Azerbaijan over the years has been building up their forces, updating their forces, training their forces to a much higher level, and You can see that in how the videos that they've released and so forth. But Armenia, hey, they're putting up a tough fight, and but so you have this enclave, as it were, and it's called the Karabakh region, Nagorno-Karabakh, I think is how they pronounce that. But so the Nagorno-Karabakh region is, it's part of Caucasus, and basically they've been having friction for years and years and years. Well, it's in an area that's, so you have Turkey, and then northeast, roughly of that area, you have like this enclave in Armenia with Azerbaijan. You have Iran down more southern area there, and southeast area, and then north of that you have Georgia and Russia, of course. And it's interesting to see how all this taking place, because it's happening right there at the doorstep of Russia. So, and Russia has close ties with Armenia, and while Azerbaijan has close ties with Turkey, Turkey's in NATO, but yet you see Turkey and Russia working together in this kind of loose alliance, as it were, increasingly close alliance with the S-400 system, the buying of the Su jets and so forth from Russia, these kind of things, working together in Libya while having some friction. It's like a perfect scenario what we see in the Gog-Magog war, which is definitely a latter times prophecy. And it talks about, that's why I believe the Gog-Magog war is an end times prophecy. It clearly says it's in the latter days that this will take place. So I think this is very near. And it kind of is a perfect scenario. They don't really trust each other. These two leaders are very similar, except different. They're both dictators, really, when it comes down to it. And but Putin is much more calculating, while Erdogan is more hot-headed, hot-blooded. He responds very quickly. Unfortunately, he wants things done right now. Whereas Putin is more calculating, takes the long approach, sees how he can maneuver stuff around. But make no mistake, he's deadly. The dude doesn't seem to have any problems with having people iced. So he's deadly. He's a dangerous guy. Yeah, I think more dangerous than Erdogan. But Erdogan's a hothead, and he's got a powerful army there. Technologically, he's got a tough army. Well trained, NATO trained. So yeah, he's a real issue, and he's been moving into the area, tried to aggressively move into the Mediterranean. So you have the Eastern Mediterranean area where he's doing surveying now, looking for natural gas resources, things like that, oil, which I've talked about previously. But that's happening on this side of Turkey. On the opposite side of Turkey, you have on the eastern side of Turkey, you have them going into the Caucasus as well, supporting them with the trainers and equipment and so forth, which is being reported that way. So these news agencies are reporting that. So you have an increasing amount of friction happening there, but at the same time, this alliance. So why would Turkey go into this area? Well, I think it's to test the alliance, to test and see if this is real, if he can really trust Russia. Because they're not crazy enough to go into Armenia all the way and invade it and try to, ethnically cleanse, Armenia, as it were. But to go into this low Caucasus area, which is, recognized by the majority of the world as being Azerbaijani territory, well, it's an easy way to test this, to see Russia's resolve, to see if they're truly an ally or not. And I think that's what Erdogan is calculating. The problem is, Putin is always 3 or 4 steps. He's a consummate politician. He's been at this game a long time, and he understands the long game. And when you have somebody who's doing that, he's kind of. That's why you notice that everybody's like, why hasn't Russia got more involved with Armenia on Armenia's side? And I think it's because Putin sees the longer game. To keep Turkey in the fold, as it were, larger trading partner, a thorn in the side, a weapon he can use against NATO because they're in NATO, that kind of stuff. It's a block, it's a shield, as it were, so that nobody can come into that area of influence, Russia's doorstep, as it were, into that area of the Caucasus and impose any kind of real problems for Putin. So, it's smart, and I think that's why he's doing that. That's why he's not rushing in to aid the Armenians. But at the same time, Erdogan's not crazy enough to go and truly invade. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he goes all the way, but I don't think he will. I think he realizes that would be a bridge too far, as it were, next thing you know, he would be facing a Russia that is determined, and then when you get into that situation, I don't think that would hold well for Turkey, even though they have a very advanced army. And then you start, all bets are off, because then Erdogan, who's not a friend of NATO's Western alliance anyway, and most of them don't look at him as being in NATO any longer, even though officially he is. I think most of the Western nations are trying to play the long game and say, well, we'll just outlast Erdogan, and then we'll get somebody back in power who truly is a ball player and truly is part of NATO. Because Turkey's an important ally, as they look at it, a bridge to the Middle East, a bridge between Eurasia and Europe. So they kind of look at those kind of areas as being, an important political player, important piece for the NATO alliance. So they don't want to give that up easily if they don't have to. But, I think God has other plans. I think, just like the Bible talks about in Ezekiel 38, 39, it's talking about this Gog-Magog alliance. This is what's going to take place. So in this elusive federation where they're testing each other to see if they can trust each other, we know that they will turn on each other because the Bible tells us they will. So when God sends a strong, powerful earthquake and so forth, and then you have this massive fratricide where they basically will turn on each other and kill each other. And also he says he brings a sword against them. What sword that is it Europe? Is it a united European Union? I don't think so. I don't think they have that united aspect right now. Power. I think it's none other than the United States, personally. I think the United States will be that sword that he brings us to bear against them. And that's the one really makes sense, So powerful wise, ability to project power, ability to, defeat an onslaught of that many powers, big, large countries, Turkey, Russia, Iran, Libya. I mean, you're talking about, there's not too many countries in the world that can do that, projected power. Really, it's maybe China, Russia, or United States, and really Russia not so much anymore, more of a regional power, even though they have nuclear weapons. But still, that's how I see things being played out. I think Erdogan is testing the waters to see if Russia's commitments to him are real, if Putin's word is real. That's why I think he's doing what he's doing there. As far as testing the waters and pushing the envelope in the Mediterranean areas, I think that he's desperate. His economy's tanking. He's got a lot of problems with his lira. He's got his currency. He's got issues happening domestically at home, and he needs the support of the people. And what better way to get the support of the people than get involved in military adventures? And when you get involved in military adventures, typically the patriotism kicks in, and people surround a leader, or at least initially, until they start seeing a lot of soldiers come home dead, wounded, destroyed, bodies broken, things like that. Then suddenly people's, over time, they start to say, is this really worth it? And why are we fighting this in the first place? And that's when the questions start getting asked. And when those questions start being asked, and then the answers usually come around, well, there was no good reason to go in there. There was no benefit to you. And at the end of the day, you destroyed a lot of people's lives so that this person could be in power. That's generally what happens most of the time. Because most of the time you can negotiate. It's better to negotiate and have peace and tranquility and work together. And most people know that. The majority of people know that in the world. There's always a better benefit for peace than it is war. And the people who like to go to war are people who are generally those types who like to have individual power. And they're willing to destroy people's lives and nations to have it. That's how corrupt their mind is. That demonic, satanic, whatever you want to call it, mindset that's in them. That's the problem. So you see that a lot happening, and I think that perfectly plays out in a scenario of what we would expect to have if we were going to have a Gog-Magog war alliance. If we've talked about this, and as Christians we've expected this, if you're going to lay this out, this is exactly how you would lay it out. You would have, a dictator in Russia that is very calculating, who ultimately gets pulled in by the hooks of his jaw, drawn into a war that he doesn't necessarily think is beneficial or going to be to his best interest, but he's drawn into it because he's calculating. The problem with calculating all the time is sometimes you get it wrong. And no matter how good you think you are at calculating and anticipating and moving the chess pieces, even the best chess players get beat. They miscalculate. And I think that's what Putin will do. He'll miscalculate, and he'll get drawn into the Gog-Magog war, thinking that there's going to be a benefit and payoff for Russia, and when in fact it's not. It'll be a total annihilation. This is not good, of their armies anyway. And then you have Turkey, obviously, moving into the areas that it's trying to expand and regather this mindset that he needs to, have a form of the Ottoman Empire, the greatness of the Ottoman, empire again. Well, it's a fantasy. It's, history is history. Today is today, and tomorrow is tomorrow. You can't live in the past. I mean, you can learn from the past, but you can't live in the past. And just because you had something in the past doesn't mean you can regather that or regain that, especially through force. I mean, the English Empire, as it were, as they say, the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, that was in the past. It's not today. It's not tomorrow. I mean, they don't have that same power and ability to project power as they did back then. Why? That time has passed. America's time will pass as well. We know a kingdom that's coming that will never end, which is our Lord Jesus Christ. That's the kingdom that will be eternal. All of the kings are temporary, and they have limited time here to rule and reign. We do know that there's a beast empire that's coming, a 10-nation coalition that will rule for a short period of time, 1 hour it says. So we should be expecting some type of new power to come into place, which means that you have to have a demise take place. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing take place with America and some of the other powers right now. This conflict is taking place. I think once the Gog-Magog war happens, there's going to be a call for global unity, global restructuring. Remember, the allies they once had are all going to be changed. People who were relying on Russia won't be relying on them anymore. People who rely on Turkey won't be able to anymore. People who are relying on Iran won't be able to. Hezbollah won't have that luxury of relying on Iran. Hamas won't be able to. You start looking at these kind of coalitions that you would normally have. Suddenly they're gone. The world's going to be totally restructured, and at the end of this battle, and a new coalition will have to be made, a new power broker, and that's where I think this beast empire will come about. I personally think the United States will be part of it, if not leading it, and it will be part of other nations as well. I think you're going to see, just like the Bible talks about, a number of nations it talks about will be part of that coalition, and that will be the final one before and during the tribulation, before the return of Jesus Christ. I think we're very near, and which means the rapture is very near. So with everything that's happening, with also the other event that's taking place, which is, is President, being diagnosed with COVID. Think about the scenarios that can be played out there. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you have a president that basically can, we don't know if he's going to be perfectly fine, and he comes right out of it, and next thing you know, he's like, hey, let's go, I'm ready to, continue the show. Or he's a guy who may be, incapacitated for an extended period of time. I mean, people get COVID, sometimes they're in the hospital for weeks, months, sometimes 2, 3, 4 months. I mean, a long time, extended period of time. Some people, they're in induced coma. So if he's in an induced coma, I mean, you're talking about transition of power. You're talking about Mike Pence becoming the president of the United States. As we go in, we're only 5 weeks out from an election. As you go into that, it completely changes the dynamic. And if Trump is victorious but unable to continue, he would have to step down, while Pence becomes the acting president, and he would be choosing his running mate at that time. And who would that be? And you start looking around, who would perfectly fit. I think Jared Kushner would perfectly fall in that category. He could easily fit perfectly to that vice president role, or vice versa. Just it's very fluid. Anything could happen. As things get really close, we're 5 weeks out, a lot of things can change very quickly. So as Christians, we need to be aware that if we're seeing what I think we're seeing, that the technology for the mark of the beast, with this SpaceX and global link that's taking place right now, that's perfectly designed to fit exactly what we would think of with the mark of the beast system, that you can, no matter where you are in the world, anywhere, you can communicate instantly. It's faster times than ever before, And I mean, you start thinking about this, they got over 800 satellites up there already. And their plan is to have, like, I believe, when I read 12,000, I think it is. So you're talking about within just a short period of time, we're talking about, thousands of these satellites. I mean, they're launching 60 or so at a shot, and they're launching these all the time. So I think their plan is to have, 1,000 by the end, just in this year. You're talking about thousands in a very short period of time. This perfectly falls in line with what we expect to see with the mark of the beast, especially if you have an economic reset, an economic transition after this Gog-Magog war. You're talking about time. I mean, the United States is at $27 trillion in debt. They're talking about doing another $2.5 trillion bailout. I mean, you're going to be at $30 trillion here pretty soon. I mean, the dollar's done. I mean, I don't think people realize that yet, but they will. I mean, the dollar is done. Any amount of money you think you got put away in the bank, it's probably going to be worthless, especially if you have hyperinflation and stuff. I mean, things are definitely going to change, and this reset will probably be a global one, but it's going to be initiated, I think, by a key point. And I think that key point is, that linchpin is the Gog-Magog war. It will be the preparation of going into the tribulation. I think it will happen before that, but also the rapture event that will take place, I think will happen after that. I think we're going to see the revealing of the Antichrist probably soon. I think Christians will know who he is. We'll be telling people, but you won't fully know until he absolutely says, confirms the 7-year peace agreement, obviously. But with these peace agreements happening, there's only so many people that are involved with it, and he's the guy that basically confirms it. And it's going to be a peace agreement between multiple nations and Israel. I believe it says multiple nations, but obviously Israel is the implication of the text of what it's talking about. Well, who's mostly involved in that? That's what you got to be looking at. I mean, there's only so many players. You have so many nations and so many players that are really, initiating these peace agreements. When everybody said there couldn't be any peace, somebody's working that peace agreement. Somebody's done the prison reform. Somebody's done the renegotiating after gas. Somebody has initiated this peace agreement, has moved the embassy, done all these things that, people say couldn't be done, and is doing it. People used to say you can't renegotiate after gas. It's too big, too complicated. Everybody's entwined. Did it. You can't do prison reform. It's just too complicated, too much. You did it. You can't move the embassy to Jerusalem. There's just going to be too much turmoil. It's going to take years to build an embassy. You did it. Gave the one of the key addresses there. Get a chance to see it yourself. So I'm talking about Jared Kushner. I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, but he's definitely number one on my list, and probably on a lot of other people's list because of just who he is. And think about it. If he's a rapture, he's Jewish. He's not a Christian. He's not going to be gone on the rapture. He'll be here for it. So he'll still be in place while other people won't. Other key leaders will be gone. If Jared Kushner is the vice president, think about it. The rapture takes place and Pence becomes the president because Trump is gone from COVID or out of the office, survives it, but maybe can no longer be the leader. Think about it. If the rapture takes place, most likely Pence is gone. That puts Jared Kushner in complete power, So start thinking about these scenarios because I think the time is very short. I mean, when you start looking at the time frames, the 7-year tribulation and so forth, and you look at the technology, you look at the alliances that are being made, I think we're very near. I think it's very close. And keep an eye on this COVID thing with Trump, very interesting things can happen. Pence could very well fall into this category. Something he's the president, they're reelected. Sympathy vote over the next 5 weeks, and Jared Kushner could very well be picked as the vice president. And like I said, if the rapture takes place, all bets are off. I think Kushner would be in perfect position to be the leader of this new alliance that will ultimately form after this Gog-Magog war. With all the turmoil taking place in the United States, it opens up the door for Erdogan to force his hand. He just recently came out and stated, from what I read today, actually, that I didn't catch the news place, but it was he said that Jerusalem was his city, their city, partly because it was part of the Ottoman Empire for quite a long time, like 400 years or something like that. So I mean, this is a guy who's just has a strange fixation on destroying Israel and taking over Jerusalem for some reason. At least in his words, in his verbiage, he seems to constantly do that. So yeah, it's interesting times. So I thought this was an important time to do a prophecy update. I hope it's a blessing to you. Keep your eye on these things, and we'll keep looking up, keep looking for those signs that the Lord told us to be, commanded us to be looking for. And not just looking, but we need to be sharing it and telling other people about it and being ready ourselves, So, the Lord's coming back soon. So he's got a promise. His promise is he's going to take us to be with him. And where he is, we'll be with him also. And he's gone to make many mansions for us. So there's going to be a wonderful place for us. And I can't wait. So look forward to seeing all our brothers and sisters in the Lord and the Lord's kingdom. So anyway, God bless. Be safe. Keep looking up and keep your eye on the things that are happening, and share it with other people. God bless.